Hello and welcome to Government with Dr. Turner. Today we're going to take a look at the system of separation of powers and checks and balances. When our nation began, it was born into a world that included kings and slavery. Our founding documents reflected the world in which they were written. For example, the Articles of Confederation did not contain a separately elected federal executive, primarily because the founders feared it as a threat to their liberty. But it quickly became evident that a government without some kind of executive would likely be ineffective. The controversial Three-Fifths Compromise revolved around the issue of slavery. Slavery was already deeply dividing, but would not be outlawed for decades. A valid criticism of the Constitutional Convention is that the delegates were unrepresentative of the country whose constitution they were composing. However, they still managed to incorporate the will of the people into American government, even if that will was constrained at times. When the founders were writing the Constitution, they understood it would need to adapt as society changed. Their focus was to create a system of rules that would effectively manage the imperfect behavior of men, but also allow for amendments as new generations came into leadership. A system of separation of powers and checks and balances were built into the Constitution to confront the tendency of men to always seek more power. Separation of power means that the power of governing was separated into three different branches of government. Checks and balances is the principle that each branch of government guards against the abuse of power by the others. With these two structural designs, the writers of the Constitution found a way to use striving after power to effectively restrain the growth of power. Checks and balances exist throughout the federal government. Both houses of Congress must agree to pass legislation, but it doesn't become law without the president's signature. Laws and executive orders may be nullified by the Supreme Court. In concert with the states, Congress can limit the Supreme Court's power of judicial review by amending the Constitution. The president can check the federal judiciary by issuing pardons and appointing judges. In fact, the entire federal court system, other than the Supreme Court, was created by Congress, because Article 3 of the Constitution mentions only the Supreme Court specifically when discussing the judiciary. In a presidential election year, the intermediate body created by the Constitution to choose the president is the Electoral College. The Electoral College exists, according to the Federalist Papers, in order to account for the possibility that factions or a tyranny of the majority could select a president that would be unfit to hold office. In this way, the Electoral College serves as a check on the power of the electorate. Let's review. A system of separation of powers and checks and balances were built into the Constitution. Separation of power means that the power of governing was separated into three different branches of government. Checks and balances is the principle that each branch of government guards against the abuse of power by the others.